There we go.
There we
just
go.
won't be able to hear him.
Yeah, we'll hear him.
Okay.
But he's gonna be on standby till.
Can you hear us, Andrew?
I can, loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Okay, we can't hear you.
You can't? Okay, one
Go
second.
to the device settings up there, the three dots.
It's because it's connected to the Epson one.
Device settings. Speakers. I think it looks like it's on mute.
Yeah.
Test. Andrew?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better. Okay, let's get
There we
the
go.
volume
The
up. if we
picture is
can.
really choppy, but that's okay.
Yeah, the internet
Oh,
here is
that
pretty
actually-
slow.
It may not be very.
Okay.
Yeah, it may not be.
You may need to speak very loudly because we can barely hear you here.
Or if you have a mic, I think a mic will help a lot. It's because we don't have like a speaker in this.
Like,
I do not have a mic.
Okay.
I apologize.
But you can hear them in the call, in the live chat.
Okay. Again. One more time, Andrew. Chat.
Chat, good morning.
It's a little bit better. I think we can hear you in here. I can hear you.
No, the audio is going to be perfect.
Okay.
Because that's directly wired to the feed. It's just in here,
Maybe I can.
Let me see if I have any way to turn up the speaker on the mic on my side.
Let me try here.
I think you're actually good, Andrew. I think we'll be okay.
Okay.
Hold on.
I do apologize for not making it and letting you know.
Dun, 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 dun.
Does that? Can you switch the speaker to this?
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, can you try speaking again?
Yes, ma'am?
Oh, that's better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Okay.
You bet.
All right. Then it is already 9:33, so I'm gonna get us started. Yeah. Okay. Thank you all for joining. Are we live? Okay, great. Hello, everyone. We're going to have our first Rio Grande Valley Project Manager Traffic Safety Training. Right now, we're here in Harlingen Cultural Arts Center. Thank you to the City of Harlingen for letting us use their space. Our agenda this morning is to have some introductions. I'm just going to ask like a real simple questions, have you all introduce yourselves. Then we're going to have a welcome by Mr. Cannon, our Executive Director, talk about some safety trends and issues in the Valley, go over some safety data analysis, and then start talking about planning and designing for vulnerable road users, familiarize ourselves with the active transportation network in the Valley, and then the strategic highway safety plan. And so in the agenda and online, I have shared some resources. I'll probably email these out to you Monday so that everyone has some resources that we're sharing today. But really quick, again, my name is Egarcia. I am a Planner 3 Bike Ped Program Manager with the RGVMPO. And here we have transportation plan. And what is the most common transportation related hazard you see in your community?
Bicycle and vehicle.
A bicycle and vehicle accident, collision,
Yeah.
crash, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. And
Hi, good morning. I'm Esther Gonzalez. I'm with the Department of Transportation, Special Projects Coordinator.
Special Projects Coordinator. And do you, I know you're not with the community specifically, but what kind of common transportation related hazards do you see?
Unfortunately, I lost a nephew to a pedestrian vehicle accident, so I'm in here.
Fully understand. Thank you for sharing that. So I completely understand there's a lot of hazards on our roadway. Thanks for sharing. We do have some virtual attendees, but since they're not here, they can use the chat or we can continue with Mr. Andrew Cannon.
Whichever one you want. I want to make sure anybody online is not being ignored.
Now go ahead and Mr. Cannon, please give us your welcome.
Well, good morning, everybody. Appreciate you making the time to be there today. I apologize for not being able to be there myself, playing catch up. Appreciate Eva and staff putting this on to have everybody there. This is an important process for us. as we work to try to minimize, if not eventually get to zero, which is what we're hoping for on fatalities on our state roadways. I think it's been since 2008 since we had a fatality-free day. So along with TxDOT, we're working towards this, and this was a great grant program that Eva was able to get to be able to help facilitate these discussions moving forward. So we do appreciate it. I guess the next slide.
Yes, sir.
So we have a new task force at TxDOT and throughout the state that I'm humbled to be a part of. The commission put together a statewide safety task force. We actually have a meeting coming up this month, made up of other MPO directors, TxDOT districts, as well as the administration. And we have two commissioners who sit on the task force, Commissioner Ryan and Commissioner New, as we move forward to try to come up with new and innovative ways to address safety and the safety concerns to bring down the fatality numbers that we have around the state. I'll be continuing to report to the task force and getting this information as we work on the road to zero, and then bringing this information back to the local communities, hopefully, so that we can find innovative ways to implement some of these. One of those changes that you can see abundantly in at least the Harlingen area the other day when I was there, like the backing plates on the signal lights that they have there on Commerce and Tyler and others. Those are very effective. It helps cut down the glare that people suffer if they're approaching a light. I know going eastbound in the morning, westbound in the evening, having the sun behind those lights is a little hard sometimes to see. Those plates really help a lot. It's such a minor thing to do, but you get so much bang for the buck in safety and protecting lives out there on the roadway. So innovative things like that we'll be working towards to bring back to the community and see what we can do to try to help implement some of those as the MPO. Is there another one? Another slide?
Yeah, just a little bit about that process that the task force has been discussing, but I can cover it if you'd like. Or
well, it's no problem. So yeah, we're looking at, you know, Chris, the crash record information, and then we've come up with 5 different things that we're hoping to report on. We're trying to make sure we have a meeting this month as we get ready to do that. And then as it says there, on an annual basis, we're hoping that all the MPOs around the state will produce a summary, and that would be done in conjunction with our districts. Our districts have a safety plan. We plan to work with them on their safety plan that they have. Each district has one, because we don't want to recreate the wheel. So we want to complement what they have with whatever the MPOs are able to move forward with. There are some initiatives. The last transportation bill did provide some grant programs out there on safety. I know that we are applying for one. Many other areas around the state are to be able to come up with a plan. And some areas are applying for implementation. Dallas-Fort Worth is way ahead of the curve. They do things such as they actually purchase police car units, pay for police officer overtime, and things like that as they move forward to try to bring down fatality rates. They have an abundance of money. I wish I had that problem. I don't, unfortunately, with our MPO, but we certainly have amazing things that we can do on the limited budget that we have over the near-term future. So with that, I think that's everything Eva wanted me to say. Again, I do appreciate you being there, even though I couldn't today, and I do apologize for that absence. I think it's tremendously important. I know that staff will be fruitful in the information that they provide you. And as always, if you have any questions afterwards, feel free to contact any of my staff or myself. And we certainly want to help work through and get to that Vision Zero status. It would be nice to be the first to do that in the state. So we hope that there's more fruit from today's program that you're able to take back to your communities and for implementation. So we do appreciate it.
thank you, Mr. Cannon. I appreciate the welcome. For those of you that don't know, we were at a House Transportation Committee hearing yesterday, and
Yes.
I was very happy to see that a lot of what was being said was similar to what I'm covering in these trainings. So
Very
Yeah.
much so.
So hopefully that's kind of the point of these trainings, and the funding is there are some federal initiatives, nationwide initiatives going on to improve transportation safety. But Texas in particular is, I think going above and beyond in pushing the transportation safety. Our legislation is behind us and wants us to continue working and support these efforts. So I just thank Mr. Cannon and everybody who works on a state and national level to help us get the resources we need to improve transportation safety, here at home, but all around the nation as well.
Absolutely.
So, thank you, Mr. Cannon.
Thank you.
And I'll just go back to this slide because for those of you that are online or maybe unaware, the metropolitan planning organizations are federally mandated to help FHWA, Federal Highway Administration, program federal funding that comes out of legislation, bills, and so on. So in the state of Texas, there are 23 MPOs, Metropolitan Planning Organizations. Before 2019, the Rio Grande Valley or the FAR district area had 3 MPOs. We had the Brownsville MPO, Harlingen San Benito MPO, and the Hidalgo County MPO. And these MPOs are based on urbanized areas and on population. So you can see how those 3 MPOs had previously been formed. But as of 2019, through the state of Texas, our governor did approve the merging of these MPOs, and we did extend the boundaries into Starr County. And so now the Rio Grande Valley Metropolitan Planning Organization is responsible for helping program federal transportation funds throughout this, what we call an MIB, Metropolitan Area Boundary. What you see in the green line is the boundary for the FAR district. That's one of the TxDOT's districts. I believe they have 25. I could be mistaken. But you can see that the FAR district, our TxDOT and state partners, I'm so sorry. Our TxDOT and state partners do end up having, actually, maybe I should show that. It's a map of all the counties. So they have a larger area. They basically manage in the rural areas. And so that's kind of how we operate and work with our state partners. See if I can get this up. Almost done. Here we go. So this is the state of Texas. This is where TxDOT, works. You can see in those yellow areas, those are metropolitan planning organizations, and then all the different TxDOT state organizations. And again, coming in at home is our FAR district and our Rio Grande Valley Metropolitan Area Boundary. So we have a growing population, but so even now, before our population grows, we want to begin addressing safety trends because of this new merger, relatively new merger in the last 3 years. This is a new opportunity for us to work regionally in our approach. We have been working in silos, community by community, county by county, or metro area by metro area. And so now, hopefully we'll give you some information about regional issues, regional trends, and we can approach it from a regional perspective. And so this is the map of the FAR district. You can see some major projects that are coming up in our long distance plan. They are mostly highways, of course, state roads. You see the second access by the island, the East Loop project for freight. You see a lot of these connecting corridors, a lot of international bridges in yellow. Those yellow dots are international bridges. So they move our goods from, the international border all the way throughout the United States. So we're a very important region, not just for the state, but for the nation and for the rest of the world. But we see a lot of crash fatalities year by year. And I always get surprised by this number. In 1980, we can start at the beginning. In 1978, I believe, we had 3,980 fatalities. And you can kind of see, like in 79, that increased to 4,200. And then in 80, 4,400, 82 back down to 4,200. And so we're kind of still in that same level after 2020, 3,893, and then 4,485. So, those numbers don't change a lot, staying between the 3,800 to the 4,400, 4,700. but those are each a life loss. That is someone's family member that has passed away on our roads. And so those numbers aren't small. Each number is a life, and that's a serious problem we have. So I want to go over, from 2018 to 2021, there was a slight decrease between 2018 and 2019, but then in 2020, even though driving decreased overall, we saw an increase in fatalities on our Texas roads. And in 2021, unfortunately, we reported over 4,400 lives lost. And so the border district fatalities apparently tend to increase way more than the statewide average. On a state level, we have a 15% increase compared to 2020. But on border districts, El Paso, Laredo, the Rio Grande Valley, they have a 46% increase. And so you can see here, our FAR district is in yellow. And in the last year, we had the most fatalities in our district in the last 4 years at 133 lives. And there are different types of crash types and classifications. Today we'll be focusing on bicycle and pedestrian safety, but I'm going to go over those trends for work zone statistics, speed-related, driving under the influence, other alcohol-related crashes, and go over kind of what we're seeing in fatalities. Again, this isn't all crashes. This isn't serious injuries. These are fatalities. These crashes equated into lives lost. And so statewide, there was an increase of 33%, and the FAR district saw a decrease, but we still had 3 lives lost in the work zone crashes. Speed-related crashes has some of our highest rates. For those of you that speed in the Rio Grande Valley, please be careful. We saw over 57% increase in the FAR district to fatalities and people losing their lives to speed-related crashes. That's 25 more people than the year before. So in the DUI, all related traffic fatalities, statewide saw a decrease by 5%, but in border districts, we saw a 59% increase. And some people say that's cultural. I really think we need to hold ourselves accountable, hold our friends accountable, hold our family members accountable. Casually, no pasa nada is not true. We are seeing lives lost. And in 1 year, we saw over 15 more lives lost to DUI-related crashes. And other alcohol-related, we saw increases both statewide and in the border district by 64%. Again, this isn't a 3% increase; it's a 64% increase, and that equals to 14 more lives lost. Motorcyclists, we have seen a decrease since 2018. I think that's because a lot of work has been done to campaign, like watch out for motorcycles, keep an eye out. I know I've seen, what are they called? Billboards with that kind of safety outreach. And so really we'll be talking more about the 3 E's and what we can do. 5 lives is still 5 lives too many, but we have seen a decrease from 2018, but an increase from 2020. In unrestrained fatalities, this is right under the speed related. These are preventable crashes, preventable fatalities, unrestrained fatalities at 52 last year. That is a lot more. It's 58% increase. Wear your seatbelts, please. Hold yourself accountable. Hold your friends accountable, your family members. We need safety. The difference between a serious injury and a fatality could be that seatbelt. So FAR district overall with commercial motor vehicles, that's what the CMV stands for. We saw 9 fatalities that year, and you can see we had 5, and that jumped up to 8 and 9. Every life matters. Commercial motor vehicles might mean freight. It's the transportation of goods. We already have a high demand for people driving. And so we know we need every single person. We need these skills. We need these individuals who do this work for our communities. But pedestrians and bicycle fatalities. On a statewide overall, we saw an increase in 2021 by 15%. And for pedestrians and for bicyclists, we saw 42% compared to 2022. But it's worse on the border district level. I really want to emphasize that. 83% increase in pedestrian fatalities, and 200% increase in cyclist fatalities. And so you can see these numbers may seem small, but again, these are friends, family members, friends of family members, and family members of friends. And so we, each life matters. And on a district level, I think we really need to do some work in this area, hence the grant and all the initiatives that we're doing recently. But in 2021, May and August saw 16 fatalities in 2 months. That average is 10 fatalities a month. And yesterday at that hearing, at that House Transportation Committee hearing, I heard 12.3 as the new monthly average. So already from 2021 to 2022, our monthly average in fatalities has increased from 10 a month to 12.3. So we need everyone's help. That's why we have law enforcement trainings. That's why we're doing these project manager training. We want to end the streak of the daily deaths on Texas roadways. The district, the FAR district and other districts, they have these new district traffic safety teams, DTST. They meet monthly and all fatal crashes are reviewed. And we try to address issues with opportunities. We review the 3 E's of traffic safety. I've also heard there's 4 E's, the 4th E being emergency services. But the preventative ones, I think, are engineering, education, enforcement before we need emergency services, right? So what could we do that could potentially save a life? That's overall what we're talking about in this training. I'm going to show you here. This is something I pulled from one of those meetings that we've been sitting on. These DTST meeting from July of 2022, we showed that in 21, we had 58 fatal crashes, but it totaled 65 fatalities. So, oftentimes one crash equates to more than one life loss. And so that's what you're seeing. And somehow, unfortunately, we are on the same track as last year. We haven't seen a decrease. We haven't seen an increase, but we haven't reached the decrease that we need to see between year to year. And so this is a snapshot of a report that we were reviewing in one of these meetings. This is what I was telling the law enforcement officers during their training is your reports matter. The information you submit matters. It is looked at, it is evaluated, and we have to take the information you put in your reports to evaluate what we can do as transportation planners, project managers to help reduce these issues. So this is an example of us after we reviewed the diagram, after we reviewed the report. We have a screenshot of where a fatality occurred. We do look at past projects that the state or the local government put in and include that scope. It was a seal coat, but it was in 2017. Safety improvement project here, but in 2016. And we identify future projects, we identify opportunities to make improvements for the engineers. This is going to be a seal coat, but if we identified lighting as an issue or unsafe intersections or other issues like that, we could do better, put in a median, put in some barriers. Unfortunately, the fatality reports help us do better planning for next time. But I know I heard the FAR district engineer share that we're getting ahead of that curve. The more that we review these reports, the more we can, take a treatment that maybe we're looking at for this intersection, but identify other intersections with similar issues and get ahead of it, not wait for a fatality report to show up before we address some recommended countermeasures. And so engineering, education, enforcement are those 3 E's that we talk about. And I know in these meetings, a lot of engineers, so it's they stick to what they can do on the street. But if you haven't seen recently, TxDOT has put up some billboards to alert people to drive safer, to cross intersections safer, and just overall just sharing more education. The law enforcement trainings are also to help increase enforcement, discuss why it's so important for our PD and law enforcement to help us reduce these fatalities. So with that, most project managers and engineers do know about the MPO, and back when we merged in 2019, but in 2020, we did do a safety data analysis for our 2045 MTP. And so I'm going to share this resource. There's a lot of really good information here, but crash trends overall, between 2015 and 2019, a total of 142,216 crashes occurred in our regional metropolitan area boundary. So this isn't the rural areas, this is just within our boundaries, and this was before we expanded into Stark County. So you can kind of see these trends. We saw in 2017 and then an increase by 2019. The same thing here. This is 100 million vehicle miles traveled. And so the crash rate per 100 vehicle miles traveled, again, we saw a decrease, but we're picking back up. And so we need to look at 2020, 2021, and then identify where we're at and where we're going. And so I will skip ahead here. Andrew mentioned that CRIS data, the crash records information system. That's how this information is pulled. And so we look at, the number of crashes, how many of those resulted in fatalities. And so this looks like a small percentage of the total crashes, but it equates to 88 lives, right? Number of serious injuries, 393.6. I don't know if you feel like I feel about serious injuries, but if they're preventable and you end up in a hospital, I mean, of course, you would rather have a serious injury than a fatality on your hands, but it's medical bills. It's recovery. Are you going to recover? I know I had a friend who became paralyzed after a motor vehicle crash. And so, this equates to still lives being changed. So I'll just skip ahead. This is a 15-page document. This is a map here, regional crashes by severity. So every red dot is a fatal related crash, and every yellow dot is a suspected serious injury. And it says suspected because unless we follow up on those reports, we don't know if they actually ended up in the hospital or what the outcome of, because sometimes you end up in a crash and the pain or the injury comes out after you report it, because maybe you have adrenaline. When you're talking to the police officer, you feel fine and you're in that moment of shock. But then later you realize, no, you know what? This is an effect from that crash. And so these are suspected. You can see here how we're still using those same crash types, but this is by contributing factors. So failing to yield right of way, under the influence. This is serious injuries, fatal and serious injuries. You can see the color differentiation here. So, you can see fail to yield equated to a lot. Please yield. Please slow down. Fail to control speed. Our biggest problem here. Unsafe speed. Again, like if you added those two together. Fail to drive in a single lane. I hate seeing that on the street. There are 11 feet or 14 feet vehicular lanes. But we're going to go over some more of this, the FHWA proven safety countermeasures, and go into what we're doing. But this data is being tracked. This specifically shows the bicycle-related crashes in blue and pedestrian-related crashes in yellow. So again, this is the document from 2020. We will be revising it every couple of years and updating that data. But in case you're wondering, how do we use that data? This is how you can use it as planners and as engineers. When we look at those regional crash hotspots, and this is your area, sparse and dense. We, the MPO, we're looking at it at a regional level, but you can look at it at a city level, at a community level, and identify those areas where you have your hotspots. And that's a tool that I wanted to show you. I won't go into it too much, but these top 20 crash intersections, are we as a region looking at that? Are we paying attention to it? Somebody did this study for us. We paid for it. And I'd like to start working on a regional level to program funding to these top 20 sites, right? We do it for vehicle miles traveled and for, what is it called, like travel times? We want to reduce travel times all the time, but I really want to see a reduction here of these crash counts in our top 20 crash intersections. But I know I talk a lot, so I'm just trying not to stay in one area too much. But if you could pull out your phones, whether you're online or whether you're in person, and go to www.menti.com. We have a code here for you, and we're going to go over a little pop quiz, but everyone's anonymous, no worries. And we're going to go over and see kind of what we're going to do before we go for 10 breaks.
All right, just so you can note that we have a comment online. It's from Frank Illegal.
Cool.
He says, we need to stress the importance of the GPS coordinates of the crash on the reports. We can't get a good analysis if we don't know where it is.
I love that. I'm going to make that. Can you make that note in the somewhere?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'll come back to that then. Yeah, that's definitely something that I think that's the other reason why we wanted to have those meetings with law enforcement, start building our relationship as transportation officials with law enforcement, because that's some really good input. If we could get law enforcement with us, giving us GPS coordinates, then we can better identify those areas in our communities. Thank you, Frank. All right, so what are the most common transportation-related hazards in your community? We kind of talked about that. So crosswalk availability for pedestrians and foot traffic infrastructure. I'll just wait for three, or maybe one more comment before we go on to the next one. Did we only have one person? How do I check where we? Thank you. Distracted driving, mobile phone. Oh my God, so many people are guilty of that. All right, I'm not sure how many people we have on with us, but what policy changes could help reduce or address these safety hazards? So again, we talked about distracted driving. I know there are some policies related to distracted driving. We talked about those pedestrian areas. So we'll just wait for one policy change potentially. And I know policy is tricky because you can create policy that you don't have enforcement of policy. It's really hard to successfully reduce or address safety hazards. So crosswalk availability, we basically need more crosswalks and foot traffic infrastructure. Accountability. So policy change. Accountability of life loss due to distracted drivers is the same as intentionally hurting someone. Completely agree. Yes, it's almost like when you're drinking and driving and you're held responsible for accidentally hurting someone. If you're distracted driving and you crash into anything, you're hurting your passengers or yourself or an individual in another unit, then I agree. It's the same as if you were drinking and driving, you chose that and you knew it was a hazard. So here's some easier questions. Just vote. What is the most efficient safety improvement? Is it, I think you can rank these, separated bike lanes? Is it sidewalks, extended intersection crossing times? We're in the city of Harlingen right now, and they have these huge, beautiful streets. It's great for moving vehicles and for freight. But as a pedestrian, as a cyclist, I would feel like maybe an intersection crossing time, an expanded intersection crossing time is needed. So bike ped refuge islands, I have another story about that. In the city of Brownsville, there's this 7 vehicular lane, state road. And I know that refuge island was being fought. But I said, how are we going to get people safely from point A to point B? The speed limit's, over 40 miles per hour, is high traffic volumes. And so we had to argue for it, but we were able to successfully build a refuge island for people crossing. So thank you all, the 4 of you who submitted answers. Our first place is sidewalks. So separated infrastructure dedicated for cyclists or pedestrians, and then separated bike lanes. Again, that's on-street infrastructure, but the separation part is key. Extended intersection crossing times for safety and refuge islands. I think those go hand in hand, but I agree completely. First and foremost, building sidewalks and separated bike lanes for cyclists and pedestrians. So if you are familiar with Complete Streets, what are some priorities? We talked about general sidewalk construction, general bike lane construction, transit-oriented development. or safe routes to school? And this is always hard for me, right? Because you want it all. You want to put all the eggs in the basket. But what might be a priority? General bike lane construction. All right. Yeah, I think I would rank them this way too. General bike lane construction, sidewalk construction, safe routes to school, transit-oriented development. I know it really depends on the schools. I heard a rumor that some schools aren't allowing kids to walk or bike anymore, that they must be dropped off. So I think that's something we need to address with school districts. I can understand from a school safety perspective, but maybe it's also because we haven't built safe routes to school. And who's coming?
Tensions, right?
Right. How do you ensure that safety? So it's true. It's a good point. But I think overall, I'm seeing infrastructure, right? And public infrastructure. So has your agency considered adopting a complete streets policy? I believe maybe you have one, maybe it's not as great. So some of them might have some. I think we just have a few more questions here. I know you're with a statewide agency, so this is whether you strongly disagree or strongly agree, and there are 4 options here. Strongly agree or disagree with cyclist and pedestrian routes to school are safe in my community. Speed limits are appropriate in my community. Funding levels are appropriate to design and improve street safety in my community, or transportation safety is a priority in my community. Funding levels are appropriate. I'm like, strongly disagree. That's me personally. Here we go. Yeah, I mean, overall, I think we could do better. We see a lot of 3s, 1.7. I agree. Overall, we need to help improve safe routes to school. The speed limits are not always appropriate. I actually had a call from a consultant. How are you guys have 30 miles per hour in these residential streets? That's way too fast. And I think because other communities in Houston or in Austin, San Antonio, they see residential areas and they go for 20 miles per hour, 15 miles per hour. There are a lot slower speeds in residential areas. I'm not talking collector roads or where commercial businesses are. But in some of those areas, the speed limits may be too fast, and the difference between an injury and a fatality. So rate the importance of the following for traffic safety: engineering, education, and enforcement. Where do we prioritize? Then you'll get a 10-minute break for being such great students and for the pop quiz.
To stay it's important because you can, right, that those all components come and play and just in one together, so it's tough to say one
more important than the other. Yeah, no, I know there's a little bit of a harmony. We did the same question with law enforcement, and they felt education, but it was like by points. It was like, 4.7, I think was engineering, and then 4.8 was enforcement, and education came in at like 4.9, right? So just by a point, that difference, we had a lot of law enforcement with us. But here we see enforcement as 4.5, kind of on the flip side, engineering as a 4, and education. We do need some harmony, some synchronicity, working together. I believe they all need to go together. And I do feel like that 4th E, that emergency services, from an infrastructure perspective is, I've talked to some EMS guys where they're like, oh, we got a call on the trail, but they didn't know where they were. They didn't know how to identify where they were. And with our ambulance or with their emergency services vehicles, how do they get on these off-road trails? How do they get there? Where are the access points? And so those are some things that, as a planner myself, I hadn't considered in building infrastructure, but it's definitely one of those fourth components that we need to consider. So this is our last question. Share any ideas you have to improve cyclist and pedestrian safety. And then if you just share a few ideas, we'll give you a 10-minute break. Any ideas? I know, what did we talk about yesterday? What were some of the answers with the law enforcement? What did we see? They were like, stay off the road. I was like, that's the one I remember the most. What else did they say? Oh, we saw driver education, like to change the manual for driver education for licensing or to do more education for licenses. There were some interesting ideas for sure.
Yeah, but you might work text that we have all about safety, right? So every year we have to take some sort of a safety training. And for me personally, it's been a while, but that education, right, that component where seeing, if it's a 3-minute, a 30-second clip or a 1-minute clip, right, it kind of is powerful, right, that message that you're sending out, and it sticks. But we hope, right, that the next time you're out on the road, me personally, motorcycle safety, I see them and I keep my distance, right? And what is the safest distance, right?
Right.
It stays. You hope that it does for everyone. So the education and sending that information out.
I agree. Yeah, we talk about it. The storytelling is so powerful, and I know I share stories. I know Fabio's heard my stories. Like we share stories, but because information is just information, but when you put it in a personal narrative, that's more impactful, and that's more likely to stay with you. So participating in those, fatality, the district traffic safety team meetings, reviewing those fatality reports, I've thought differently about U-turns. I didn't expect that, I mean, every once in a while I do a U-turn, not all the time, but after learning that 2 individuals passed away after doing a U-turn, they didn't see a car coming, I think twice. I look back more carefully before, I don't even think I've done a U-turn since that training, but I agree. Let's see what some of these ideas are. We have improved streets to include lanes and crosswalks, enforcing new policy revolving around safety for these groups, improved intersection visibility. That's some of the stuff that we've discussed at those meetings as well. Add bike lanes outside of the roadway with shared use paths, and more safety training for cyclists at any age. Yeah, I'd love to see more programming in the after-school recreation groups. Some bicycling clubs in the schools would be really great. And yeah, I think overall, just cycling groups could help us better educate some of the region. So with that, it is now, let's just say 10:15. I'll give everyone a 10-minute break, and we'll come back at 10:25 to continue our training. Let me just go back to the agenda, but we'll come back at 10:25. So we're going to get back started. We are now, if you're looking at the agenda, at the planning and designing for vulnerable road users. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Rio Grande Valley's public health and demographic data. Some of you may have heard this. I'm pretty sure Frank has, maybe Octavio, but for the rest of you, I'm hoping this is new information and kind of drives home, what we've been talking about. It's a little gloomy. We talked about fatalities and our issues on the roads, and I feel like our population health and our demographics, double down on that. But it's just why we need bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure anyway. So if you haven't learned, the CDC says that the social determinants of health, of population health, also known as public health, community health. It's based on 4 categories. 10% of it, contributors is the physical environment, right? Environmental quality and the built environment. So for planners and engineers, this is our 10%. This is our bucket. What are we building to help or hurt population health? Socioeconomic factors is the largest contributor for population health, and at 40%. This means the education level, employment, income, family social support, and community safety play a huge contributing factor to a population's health. And so we talked about that with our law enforcement as well. But healthcare, access to care, quality care is 20%. So in our area, I'll talk a little bit more. We don't have a lot of insurance. A lot of people go to Mexico for that access to care because we don't have it in our communities. And then personal health behaviors is 30%. Tobacco use, diet, and exercise. Those are things we cannot change. People always say, focus on what you can change, not on what you can't change, right? So things that we can change and that we'll focus on is that physical environment, the built environment. So this is an old slide. I meant to bring up some new data that my coworker Javier had put together on historically disadvantaged communities. But here what you'll see is data from 2018, comparing the United States demographics to the state of Texas's demographics and Cameron County and Brownsville. Cameron County has similar statistics as Hidalgo County, so they're not too far off. We're still talking about the same kind of changes. But on a state level, our Hispanic population at a state level is less than 40%, but on a regional level, it's about 90%, okay? And that's way off from the US statistics of 18%. We have very young population, 30%, and in some communities as high as 33%, a third of their communities are under 18. What does that mean? It means that maybe these kids, they don't have access to vehicles. They have to walk or bike for independence to get places. They don't probably have their own homes, their own spaces to play or to be safe. And a lot of our population speaks another language other than English at home, 75% in between, average. And that's way different than Texas and the United States. We have a lower high school graduation rate, a lower college degree rate, and then lower broadband households with broadband internet, really low median household income. You see on a national and a state level, 57,000 is that median household income. But here in the Valley, we're seeing 36,000. And so these are, again, old data, but I don't think much has changed. These numbers haven't changed significantly in the last 5 years. But per capita income, also really low, especially when you compare it to national and state averages. And people in poverty, pretty high, almost double the state averages at 28% of people living in poverty. And so that's on a county level. I found these old graphics, but we have the 5 counties in the Rio Grande Valley here with the highest poverty rates. You can see the lowest poverty rates are north of us. So we're a really low income population. 80% of our population is either overweight or obese. And that has a huge impact because, unfortunately, 1 in 3 people are diabetic. And that's significant because on a national level, 1 in 3 people are projected to be diabetic in 2050. And we're already there. We have more health challenges. We have really high rates of disability from chronic disease. Particularly, we have the highest rate of amputations due to diabetes in the state and in the nation. I know maybe some other coworkers, I lost a friend to complications due to diabetes. She had to have her right foot amputated, and then it was up to her knee, a second amputation. They took out more of her leg, and then ultimately she lost her life. And she was 47 years old, not working, 20, 30 years for the city and unable to retire just due to diabetes, a preventable disease. So that's significant, especially with over 60% of our adult population being uninsured, really high rates of cardiovascular disease, cancer, liver, kidney, and infectious diseases, and we lack healthcare infrastructure. So when you're planning, when you're designing, this isn't for the people that can afford to drive. I know there's a lot of recreational cyclists, a lot of people running and training, and that's great. We want healthy levels. We want to see that recreation. But when you build infrastructure, design sidewalks, design roadways, whatever it is that you're working on as a transportation official, please consider the people with disabilities, the people that have no choice but to find shade behind a sign and fix his tool that he's carrying on his bike to get to work and to earn income for his family. We talked about some policies that can be done. If you're a planner that can promote new policies, there are several. I know we have a lot of other partners that are helping us program physical activity and the use of our trails and our sidewalks in our area. So this is a Bikes for Tykes program that the School of Public Health helped pay for. This was like a health event. You can kind of see all the tents in the background. Other organizations, I know Healthy Communities of Brownsville. I've seen the university put this on. They have bike rodeos at clinics, and this helps teach youth how to maneuver on the sidewalk, how to maneuver around debris, how to do stops and practice their hand signals. We're supported by United Way 1 year to do like book club on the trails and have these bikes and rent them out, give out helmets and help kids, practice being safe on the roads. So programming and education is that component here. They're teaching them how to fix bikes. It's a low-income community. These kids are volunteering and they're teaching the next generation of kids. Amenities such as bike parking is also critical to help with the overall promotion of cycling and walking in our communities. We do have some open streets events. I like these because the School of Public Health helps collect data and do surveys of people there. And we were able to determine that having events and programs increases people's physical activity levels. And here you see an old image of the former fire chief and the former police chief cycling together to promote cycling safety in the city of Brownsville. And public input is always critical. We're talking about plans. But overall, this conversation needs to happen year after year, that there are vulnerable road users in our community. So my experience has been in Brownsville and in Cameron County in general. I'm just now expanding, as the MPO is new. I'm new to the MPO, and we're expanding to Hidalgo County. But back in 2015, all of these agencies came together to help develop a vision for the county. And Hidalgo County, by the way, should be kicking off their plan either later this year or early next year. But ultimately, the goals of the plan were to generate new economic opportunities, diversify the local tourism market, link our communities together, creating a regional bicycle and pedestrian network, and promoting healthy lives. So that plan is called the Active Plan, or the Low Rio Grande Valley Active Transportation and Active Tourism Plan. It was made possible by this health foundation, and ultimately that plan proposed an on-street network and an off-street network. So you see that in blue is that on-street loop around the county, and in red you see those off-street facilities. And so these facilities are connecting communities by separated infrastructure to improve safety. We still have to be very careful with intersections when we start planning out this, start building out this plan. But ultimately, I love the idea of collecting local public lands. We are all public land managers, and locally managed public lands, county parks, state roadways, even state right-of-way, and national areas are all public lands that can be coordinated, or agreements can be drafted to use their easements and their land for connectivity. So some people can be against, this investment, right? In the Great Allegheny Passage is an example of a trail that cost $80 million to complete. $80 million. That's a lot of money, especially when it comes to bike ped funds. But it now generates up to $100 million in annual spending. Okay, and I think like when we think about $80 million, that second causeway is supposed to cost something like $500 million or $750 million. So really, to build the network that we need, the return on investment would be way more impactful if we built bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. The state of Oregon, known for cycling, generates $400 million in economic activity annually. And then even paddling systems, which I don't think I highlighted. This plan also incorporated kayaking from the World Birding Center in South Padre to the World Birding Center in Harlingen. So those are even an economic tool. Paddling tours contribute $55 million in economic impact over here in North Carolina. So what does that mean for the Rio Grande Valley? You're talking about Oregon, you're talking about Maine and Pennsylvania, right? Eva's talking about other areas of the nation. But we did do in 2017 an economic impact study, looking at that plan, using that plan, identifying 291 miles of trails and routes on system, off system, and kayaking. And it would generate more construction jobs, 3 million walkers, hikers, bicyclists, and paddlists each year, and projected 70 million annual spending by out-of-county visitors. So the infrastructure you build does have a return on investment. It costs money to maintain. We know maintenance costs are super high. That's one of the challenges in building safe bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, but the potential return on investment is there. And more importantly, I think for us natives that have a lot of family and friends here, we found using some statistics from the School of Public Health that in Brownsville, people who live near trails exercise 22% more than people who don't. And by building more infrastructure, that 22% of more people being more physically active could potentially save our friends and family, our constituents and public citizens, $6 to $12 million a year in healthcare cost savings. And so I know that's something that we could all benefit from. And that's something that we're looking to do. So again, this is the comprehensive approach. We're talking about traffic safety in general, transportation safety, but we have, we're working together. Our Metropolitan Transportation Plan with a lot of highway projects, with our Transit Development Plan for public transportation and mass transit, and then the Active Transportation Plan. And so that's kind of that's my boat, right? Active Transportation Planning and Implementation. We have 3 goals: connectivity, accessibility, and community health. Different initiatives are recommended under those for those goals. And so design standards is something I'd like to work on. We're working on a facility inventory. We're working on bicycle and pedestrian counts. Eventually, we're slowly building a regional data portal. But we're starting with those short term. So complete street policies here. Education and encouragement, we have bike share, open streets, media awareness campaigns. Safety has those law enforcement trainings, which we've kicked off this year, ordinance enforcement, et cetera, et cetera. For tourism, that's also one there, walking and biking, but I see that more in medium and long term. So as part of planning and design, unless we have any comments or questions, I wanted to share some resources that I put in the agenda for today's meeting. I'm not going to go into the Rails to Trails Conservancy building trail box, but Rails to Trails Conservancy is a national nonprofit helping us promote active transportation in every community, especially for regional networks. And they have a ton of resources in that trail building toolbox. If you're going to apply for a grant, or if you have identified a route or some public land, I recommend you go through there. FHWA's proven safety countermeasures. I showed a little bit about that in the safety data analysis. I'm not going to dive too deep into it because I want to show you some other things. But I recommend if you're an engineer or a planner and you have identified a hotspot for crashes, or you've identified areas that need improvement or an opportunity, like you're already going to work on a road project and there's ways you can improve things, please go to FHWA's Proven Safety Countermeasures Initiatives. They have some really neat info on what you can do. And so with that, did I start there? Okay. Sorry, let me check my agenda. Okay, yeah. So let me just show you here. I'm not going to go there yet. One of the links that I showed you is NACTO, National Association of City Transportation Officials. This is really for the local roads, those local, the ones that the cities maintain. It's not a huge, it's not used for TxDOT state managed roads, but there are some really good design guidance. I love the visuals in these. You know, this is for autonomous urban vehicle, the street stormwater guide, which we're a river delta. Let's consider stormwater management as part of our engineering and design. And then I think another one I really wanted to highlight was designing streets for kids. If you're looking at safe routes to school, if you're or applying for other grants, designing for all ages and abilities. This is really critical. I know some communities have really vocal people that want to see more ramps, more accessibility. Again, we talked about we have like high rates of diabetes and obesity. We have a lot of motorized wheelchair users. And I know you've seen people riding their wheelchairs on the street. I know you've seen it. So please use these resources for, you know, this is high comfort bicycle facilities. If you're going to build near a dialysis center, if you're going to make an improvement near a hospital, you know, consider the individual who has to use a wheelchair or other type of what do they call them? Tools, like for mobility. But don't give up at the intersection. I think this one's great. You know, you can see here just in the design guidance without me going too much into it, curb cutouts. You can see how they're better guiding the cyclists here to cross streets safely. This is kind of seen as refuge island right here, right? This was before negative space. It wasn't being used. It caused, I think, motorists to be a little bit more careless instead. But by building out this infrastructure, you know, maybe this is a low cost, a little piece of concrete. It can reduce the speed of the motorists and improve safety at some of these major intersections. So I really wanted to show you that. I won't dive into that. But what I want to spend time on, and one of the last items we have here, I'm doing great on time. This is great. So we have the Texas Strategic Highway Safety Plan. How many of you have seen this plan before? No? Yes? Maybe so? Perfect. It's a good thing if you haven't seen it. Good for me, because it means that I'm showing you new resources and tools. So let me just zoom out a little bit. But this Texas Strategic Highway Safety Plan, you know, it's for the road to zero. Texas together on the road to zero. They have different 7 areas of greatest concern. These are identified based on data. These are data-driven plans, data-driven strategies. And so I'm not going to go into all of them because we know what we're focused on today. But if your concern is distracted driving, intersection safety, impaired driving, old road users, speeding, roadway and lane departures, please take a look at them. There's strategies in all of them. You can see the whole plan here. There's a lot of data for annual crashes. I'm pretty sure, I think I try to play with it. You can dive into your community's data here. It's a little bit easier to use than the query tool where you have to go into the CRIS data. And then there's like a planning survey if you want to give feedback. But so many resources, so many, you know, programs and things to look into. But I'm going to focus today on pedestrian safety. So pedestrian safety, the description based on Texas and TxDOT, is the problem is crashes with pedestrians are a concern given that pedestrians are more likely to sustain fatal or severe injuries compared to vehicle occupants. The pedestrian safety emphasis area encompasses crashes that involve at least one pedestrian and one motor vehicle. Pedestrian crashes accounted for 3,434 fatal crashes, 16% of all fatal crashes, and 6,815 severe crashes, 7% of all serious crashes, from 2010 to 2016. So you see here the biggest concern, 79% of fatal pedestrian crashes occur at nighttime. I talked to the law enforcement officers. We gave them the bike lights and the helmets. The bike lights are for cyclists, but encouraging also pedestrians to wear lights, to wear reflective gear, but more importantly, on an engineering perspective, how do we light up those areas? How do we create reflective paint on the intersections and make sure that, pedestrians are seen at night? We can't stop people from walking at night or from biking at night. We don't know why they're doing it. We know the heat is bad during the day. So some people like to use the nighttime to get their workouts in. But that's a huge concern and something that I think us as planners and engineers can consider when we're developing new projects. So actually, I think we can go over some of this. We went over some of the data, but they do have more information about statewide fatalities and serious injuries. We talked about contributing factors for pedestrians. Intersections are 29%, impairments 24%, distraction is 14%, some head-on. I don't know what SBROR means. I've said it twice now, but I'm going to learn that one when I get out of here. So older road users, which I feel up until last year, I had all four of my grandparents, and I know it's harder and harder for them to get to point A to point B. But speeding is still a huge contributing factor. So I'm not going to dive into this, but 78% is more urban. And again, that nighttime statistic, you can look deeper into it. I haven't shared this with you all. Most of you know, I used to bike for years to college and from my house. It was an 8-mile commute one way. And my mom would always be like, call me when you get there, call me when you stop, call me when something happens. Like, she wanted to know when I got home. And I'm in college, I'm 23 years old. I'm like, Mom, te calmas, I'm going to be fine. It's fine. And I would tell her, I remember telling her, it's because I'm a girl, I'm a lady. They give me more space. And it's crazy because this data proves it. If you see here, the proportion of pedestrians with fatal and serious injuries relative to the proportion of the population, it's mostly men. Men are more likely to get a serious injury or fatality in as a pedestrian. And so, I don't know if it's because I'm a female, they're like, oh, she's so cute, give her more space, or like, they don't trust. I don't know what it is a natural social norm or something to be more careful with women. But I think, as someone, I think there's more women than men in the valley. So I'm like, can we just not have more men passing away to preventative issues? But here are the strategies. There's 7 strategies altogether. And so improve driver and pedestrian safety awareness and behavior. I have to applaud TxDOT for picking up the game, for doing more lately. I've seen targeted advertised ads on my Facebook account saying, be more careful when you're crossing intersections. Know your rules as a cyclist. I've seen billboards. I think in McAllen, they started doing live advertising. I don't know what it's called, but they have people wearing signs that are walking and biking. So we are working on a regional level to improve driver and pedestrian safety awareness, reducing pedestrian crashes on urban arterials and local roadways. That's what I need you all for. You all as planners and engineers. We'll dive deeper into strategy number 2 here. But I want to continue sharing the 7 strategies. Improving pedestrian visibility and crossing locations. We've talked about that. I think that's also something we can do is better identify areas, work better with our utility partners, make sure some areas that have lighting that aren't working is reported. But number 4 is improving pedestrian networks. We're going to talk about the facility inventory in a little bit and go over what we have. Actually, I think I skipped that. Anyway, I might have to go back to that one. And then improving pedestrian involved crash reporting. That's what we were talking about with law enforcement. Those crash reports are critical to what we understand for pedestrian involved crashes. So hopefully we'll see that improve over time. And then number 6 and number 7, I don't personally feel like we're doing yet, but maybe in the future. Number 6 is establish vehicle operating speeds to decrease crash severity. And then number 7 is developing strategic pedestrian safety plans tailored to local conditions. And you heard Mr. Cannon touch on that a little bit. The RGVMPO is planning to apply for a regional comprehensive action plan to improve safety. Hopefully we get funded, but that is something that we want to do, is we want to create a safety plan tailored to our local conditions. But with that, let me see. Yeah, well, it's like, do I go forward? Do I go backward? We'll continue with the safety plan. So I'll come back to our active transportation facility, but there are, this is a strategy. This is strategy number 2. There are different countermeasures identified. You can see here there's a total of 7, and 3 of them have action plans. So as planners and engineers, I wanted to go over this. They want us to develop, a research problem statement, but basically incorporating a prioritized list into existing planning and funding decisions. So safe distances, right, between safe pedestrian crossings. That's those curb extensions that we're talking about. And I hope you all are familiar with that term of curb extensions, but that normal street edge of curb, typically stays in one line. But what they're talking about is the space between pedestrian crossings is maybe at intersections. Building those curb extensions would improve safety in those areas. And that might also be refuge islands. So here's one for the description is implement pedestrian-oriented design treatments at high volume pedestrian activity locations. So how do we determine what's high volume activity locations? Well, the RGVMPO is working to, hello. Hi. The RGVMPO is working to expand our counter data program. We have about 17 bicycle and pedestrian counters in the region right now throughout the Rio Grande Valley. We're hoping to continue putting more counters to track and determine where those high volume pedestrian activity locations are. If you're working in a specific community or if you're aware of certain intersections with high volume pedestrian areas, please let us know. And if we can't put a permanent counter there, we can put a temporary counter there to kind of determine what those volume levels are. But overall steps for implementation is compile and disseminate methods to identify characteristics or locations. This likely won't be my last training for planners and engineers. I'm thinking at a minimum, we might want to do an annual one to continue talking about our progress and bringing these back up. We also see a lot of turnover and new people coming in and out of the community. So more than likely, we'll be doing this on an annual level, but identifying those locations and lead organizations, identifying suitable treatments, which will go through, this is saying review available pedestrian design guidelines and practices in Texas, in the United States, and internationally. So this is going to depend on, are you working on a state road or are you working on a local road? But identifying and securing funding, implementing the treatment, and educating the public about the treatment before evaluating the efficiency of that treatment. So I know in Brownsville, we have some shared use lanes. They're not designated bike lanes. They're not separated facilities, but they are certain areas where the traffic volume is low, the speed limits are low, and the treatment for cyclists in that area is to ride on the road with the vehicle since it's not as frequently traveled and the speed limits are low. But it is part of the medium to long term. We want to get started on it now and having conversations about it now, but there's a lot to do. So, there's, again, more information here, policies and programs. But I feel personally as a planner or as an engineer, I prefer infrastructure over policies and programs. Infrastructure is so much more permanent. For me, it feels like the juice is worth the squeeze. Policies are so hard to continue enforcing. Programs are so hard to continue operating. So you can have a good program one year, like we talked about the bikes for tykes and other things, but those programs tend to fall off after a couple of years. And I think people want new activities and new programs. But we won't dive too much into that. I want to show you, the active transportation facility inventory. And so we'll go here. I think it's already up. Sorry. Did I bring the map up? I don't even think I did. Oh, here it is. My bad. Okay. So the RGVMPO, again, a newly merged regional level. For the first time, we really kicked this off like 6 months ago, I feel, maybe a little bit longer. But we're trying to collect all of the data that the region has on active transportation facilities. And so we did start our planning efforts based on our plan, of course. We have an Excel sheet here that you can download of off-street infrastructure. What we're trying to do is gather more data, fill in these blanks. Since we don't have this information, we have like the name of the trail, and some of these are like walking trail. But what's the surface material? Some people want to know, is it asphalt? Is it concrete? Is it caliche, gravel? What's the width? Is it 8 feet? Is it, 14 feet? Can I bring my friends? Am I going to be able to walk and talk? My dogs? And then, any additional comments, like some of these trails have a parking lot on Altenglor, or, what other information can we put about amenities, rest area, restrooms, that kind of stuff. On-street facilities, we are also collecting, and we have some routes that maybe don't have the from or the to. We're asking if they are protected facilities. There are some that are yes. I didn't capture any in these screenshots. But is it a bike lane? Here's some share rows. You can add additional comments, the length. Here we're trying to identify signs are off of the road, and then street markings are on the pavement. And then what communities are those in? And so you can edit these documents and mail it back to us if you have additional information, like if you want to fill in some stuff from your community. But this is something that we really need your help with. We're asking also avid cyclists to help us collect some of this data. But we have a draft of the map here, and I'm sorry I didn't load it up before. It's going to take a minute. But this is our current infrastructure plan. Inventory. And so here you can see the layers that we have, right? We have on-street in green, off-street in orange. You can click sidewalks, but there's a ton of data. We're going to be adding transit routes and proposed routes. So if you have any GIS files of proposed routes, we're looking for that. But you can, I won't go too hard. You can see here, for a region, Brownsville is pretty connected. We're working on a connection to Los Fresnos. Harlingen is pretty sparse. And it may not be that they don't have bike lanes or trails. It may just be that we don't have the data to reflect that inventory. And so if we, the transportation planning organization, doesn't have that data, then how can we share that with members of the public? How can we share these safe spaces to walk and bike? But I like that Hidalgo County is slowly connecting its communities here by trail, by bike lanes, but there's definitely some improvements, some gaps in our network on a regional level to fulfill. And so, sorry, I didn't mean to zoom out so much. Some good news about this is that in addition to working with you local agencies, the state is funding like 3 pilot programs for district-wide bicycle master plans. And the FAR district was selected to develop a district-wide bicycle plan. And so that's good news for us to have the state partners, consulting with us and working with us to identify routes for cycling. But in addition, I had mentioned that LRGV active plan. Hidalgo County is putting a similar plan together. I know FAR has a pedestrian safety plan. McAllen is working on a Vision Zero plan. And so we have a lot of this in our wheelhouse, but we need more. Our Or do I have any questions at this point on the facility inventory? Okay, cool. So you've seen kind of what the plan is, what the strategies are. I'm going to go deeper into some tools you can use. This is called Street Mix, and you can just say, like, I'm in Harlingen, so this is Tyler Street. I don't know if it's Tyler Road or Tyler Street, but you can play with this tool. I'll email it to everybody. What it allows you to do is design or render some of the roadways. And so you can kind of play with this. Do you want to do a buffer? This is set to landscape, but maybe you want to plant trees. You can turn here. Oh, let's have this is going in all directions, or this is only going to go straight or left. And this is going to go, I don't know. No, we don't want it sideways. Okay, that's fine. It was perfect. But you can kind of change the direction of the vehicle. You can change what you want there. If you want, this has like a bus, a share row. That means, the cyclist is using that lane. But I think this is a really neat tool for planning. If you haven't already used it, if you haven't already seen it, I know some engineers just focus on doing the actual civil plans. But if you're applying for funds, or if you want a conceptual idea to take to the public, to take to your commissioners, Street Mix is a great tool for you to use. And again, I recommend looking at the design guidance manuals, seeing what they recommend for I don't know how much right-of-way you have, how many vehicular lanes you need. Is it a transit route on that road? What type of infrastructure is being called for, but it's super, super helpful for planning purposes. But if you are working on state roads, TxDOT is a little bit, they're getting better at what they're allowing on their state roads for cyclist and pedestrian infrastructure. And just this past year in 2021, they issued a new bicycle accommodation design guidance. So I'm not sure if everybody has read this, but these are basically the new recommendations from the state. And I wanted to cover some of this. They have like supporting policy and design guidance. You can kind of see what I've shown you there, that AASHTO and FHWA guidance. Those are all for like national and state highways. But NACDO is the one for those local roadways. And so projects that can be expected from bicycle accommodations, they really like target the design users. So again, we talked about like if you're working in an area with a lot of people with disabilities, or if you're like near an elderly home, consider what type of land use you have in the area you're planning for, and then look for some of those recommendations in there. And so I think this is what's great news for me is prior to 2021, I hadn't seen buffered bike lanes on something that TxDOT allowed in their roadways. So they're definitely understanding that we need a better variety and more protection for cyclists and pedestrians. So they are allowing for more things. And then they do have some considerations for alternatives and design exceptions or design waivers that you can get for your projects if needed. But this is really where all of that is. So let me just see, we went over the supporting policies. I want to show some here. So some shared lanes and considerations. I just want to cover this. We talked about those shared lanes, right? I said in Brownsville, it's like low traffic volumes, slow speeds. And so, the US DOT did release this statement, and the memo allowed for the use of 14-foot wide curb lanes or shared use lanes. That's vehicular lanes for all widening and non-widening urban projects within the existing right-of-way. So these shared lanes should only be considered as a suitable bikeway accommodation when the following applicable conditions are met. In an urban core, suburban, rural town context, if the roadway is 35 miles per hour or less and has less than 3,000 vehicles per day. So if you're not sure what your traffic counts are, I know a lot of communities may have the ability to do their own traffic counts, but if you're from a smaller community or if you don't have the resources, contact the RGVMPO. We have some traffic counts equipment or we could work with the state to get traffic count equipment to go out and measure some areas. So if you're planning some projects and you need some help with that, we do want to make sure we're following TxDOT's guidance and playing by the rules. I like to call it coloring within the lines, because we need their blessing and, more importantly, their funding to get this work done. So in a rural context, the roadway can be 45 miles per hour or less and less than 1,000 vehicles per day. And so I don't know if you're familiar, but these are some of like those rural areas. I feel like north of at Couch Elsa, there's just 2 vehicular lanes. It's narrow. More than likely, there's no curb. It's just drainage ditch. And so if that facility is not 55 miles per hour and it's 45 or under and it has low traffic volumes, then you can use those state facilities for shared use lanes. So there are a lot of projects here. I know that they're talking about funding. And so in case you want to look at more funding opportunities, we're going to be posting some of these resources on our website. But there's a lot of information here. But we're going to go over these bicycle planning principles, excuse me. All right, one more. Okay, so do you mind reading safety?
Sure.
That is
separate bicycles from motorized traffic where the speed differential and traffic volumes are higher. Reduce conflicts between bicycles and pedestrian traffic on shared use paths, side paths. Minimize speed differential and conflict points where practical to minimize or eliminate injury. Provide sufficient clearances to obstacles to avoid crashes, and reduce or eliminate conflicts along the route, including intersecting roads and drivers.
Thank you. So this is the basic planning principles for safety. And then for comfort, do you mind, Octavio?
Yeah. Recognize that different bicycle users have varying levels of comfort for various roadway conditions. Minimize exposure to traffic, noise, and emissions. Minimize or avoid conditions that require bicyclists to dismount during a trip. Provide sufficient distance to obstacles. Establish geometric criteria that provide a comfortable facility to operate a bicycle, and minimize or avoid conflicts with pedestrian traffic.
Thank you. I want to show a chart that I think is like right around the corner. I hope it is. Okay, well, I'll show you one, but this comfort level, I mean, if you haven't already seen the chart, it's basically about, there are a small percentage of cyclists that are not afraid, right? They're the daredevils, they go out there. And then there's another percentage that are confident, but careful, cautious. But the largest percentage, I think it's like 57%, I want to say, we'll find out if I'm right or wrong, but they are interested in cycling or biking, but they don't feel comfortable. And so I think that's the big takeaway. We talked about population growth, land use, we're a border district, our safety statistics. What can we do really so that you feel comfortable letting your kid walk or bike to school, so that you feel comfortable knowing your elderly parents or grandparents can get to the Lopez supermarket or El Globo or something, nearby? Because as we age, or if we're young, we lose that independence from being able to have a motor vehicle, even if we can't afford it, right? So I think comfort is critical so that we're really building infrastructure for all ages and for all abilities, right? But connectivity is, our basic principles here are accommodate local bicycle and transportation routes and networks. That's something that the MPO is also working closer with our metro areas, hopefully, to continue building that connectivity. Connect bicycle accommodations and intersecting streets at a local scale for access to destinations. Are they trying to get to the university? Are they trying to get to the school or the restaurant? I know there's some taco places. I was talking to the law enforcement officers that they're like, we see a lot of pedestrians over here because everyone's coming to get tacos, and they park over there because it's a little taco place that doesn't have good parking. So just to get to the restaurant, you have an increase of pedestrians for that. So again, these are really based on detail on your community level and what's around there. But allow for user choice of routes by providing a dense and connected network. So maybe I'm comfortable on a bike lane that's not protected or buffered. But I definitely have friends who don't feel as comfortable on bicycles. They feel a little bit more nervous. They're not as comfortable dismounting or stopping and going. And so they want a trail. They don't want to ride with me on the street. They want to ride with me on the trail. But providing seamless transitions between different on-road and off-road facility types. This is a lot of ramps, signage, wayfinding, eliminate barriers and provide continuous bicycle accommodations to support that network connectivity, integrate design with local bicycle transportation plans. I think that's something else that we're doing. TxDOT is doing a statewide inventory of plans. The MPO has kind of done our own internal one, and I plan to upload all those plans to the statewide inventory. But, you know, carry accommodations through intersections. That's one of the big ones. We talked about intersection safety being one of the big problems. So for both on-system and off-system roads. And overall cohesiveness. I told you in the plan, there's one of the initiatives is to do design standards on a regional level. You know, we are different than North Texas. We are different than West Texas, where it's a little bit drier. But maybe we can look at Houston's example. They have bayous and we have a river delta. We have our lasacas, we have our drainage canals and our irrigation canals. And so I think there's a lot more that we can do to use what we have and create cohesiveness. We talked about wayfinding. The average citizen doesn't know when they're transporting between communities, right? They don't know where the boundary is. They don't know where that level is. They just feel the difference between, you know, maybe some great infrastructure and some terrible infrastructure or lighting. And so how do we create cohesiveness and how do we regionalize our routes? I'm going to skip some of this. It's already 11:11. But, you know, there are some other factors to continue. The vehicle matrix, vulnerable options. This is that chart that I was telling you about. That highly confident group is very narrow, 4 to 7%. Someone confident is what I would call myself, 5 to 9%. But there's so much more, 51 to 56% in Texas that identify themselves as interested but concerned. So how do we transition that? I mean, I know you probably feel it as much as I do. Traffic in the Rio Grande Valley is getting more difficult. Congestion is increasing. But here's a simple graph that, for treatment's sake, if you have a low speed and low volumes, a shared lane or a bike boulevard works. But as you increase in volumes or increase in speed, you want to see a bike lane, and a buffered is preferred. So what does that buffer look like? It's, you know, we'll show you some cross sections here in a minute. But then overall, the majority, especially on state roads where the speed limits are high and traffic volumes are high, you want a separated bike lane. Or more importantly, I think a shared use path. And so some of those NACDO design guidance say a shared use path should be a minimum of 8 feet to accommodate both cyclists and pedestrians. So there's some information for rural context if you want to look more into rural, but we're focusing on an urban area. This, you know, again, they're focusing on shoulders, but we're focusing on urban. So here's that type of separation that they want. Again, shared lane, rural, this is also for rural, but then you have bike lane, dedicated facilities, buffered bike lane. You can see here more closely that buffer looks like it's about 1 foot or 2 feet. That really does help provide some comfort or some buffer area. Like if you put the rumble strips over here or a little bit further off, then you can kind of prevent motorists from coming into that dedicated space for cyclists. The separation, whether it's just a concrete curb, you see like those little parking lot concrete curbs, you could put those on the streets and on a linear way and then create concrete barriers, you know, step by step. And that might be cheaper than a complete curb and gutter extension, especially when you're planning for drainage, right? Like we need to. And so then that separated shared use path, that is the ideal situation. So here, yeah, here's some of that buffer for a shared use path. I like the one that's on University Boulevard in Brownsville. It's the road, it's a nice buffer with some trees and some shade. And then you have a shared use path that's large enough for their golf carts, and everyone is accommodated perfectly. So there's more info here. I'm going to share these links for you all, depending again on the type of Infrastructure you're looking to buy, we can work more closely for treatments or recommendations. But I like to, we can't tell you what to build. Your budget's going to depend on it. Your right of way is going to depend on it. But ask your community what they want, right? I think these guidance or these treatments, these options are a great way to get the public involved, because you're not saying like, hey, tell me what you want. You're saying, hey, do you want A, B, or C? And that's easier for them to communicate when they can visualize it and they know what you're talking about. And so I'll just go back to our presentation here. Again, I'll share all of these resources with you so you can see. But I wanted to show, I wanted to go deeper into best practices, but as our first training, I didn't want it to be too technical. I wanted to give an overview so everyone understands, what you're doing in your city, on your street, from segment A to segment B, impacts the city, impacts the region, the county, and then it really impacts like the state and the federal statistics. But here, what you see, this is like a 2014, I don't know, 20 something, 15 maybe, but we're doing a study. We coned off one of the vehicular lanes. This is 3 lanes of vehicular traffic going, I want to say it's westbound. And we cut off one with traffic cones and we put traffic counts to see if we removed some of the roadway and did a road diet, could we still, would it impede traffic? Would it create like a negative issue for traffic congestion? But we found that it wouldn't. And so you can see here the before. This is that 3 vehicular lanes. We have the zoo here, the Gladys Porter Zoo, and we had a sidewalk right there. And they're so close to each other. There's a Cummings Middle School was around the corner, and you can only fit one person. Like 2 people cannot walk abreast here, and definitely not safely. And you would see students walking and taking up the lane, and it was dangerous, right? And so after we did that study, we found that if we removed one of the 3 vehicular lanes, we wouldn't change traffic congestion too significantly. And we had the ability to create a buffer between that fence and increase vegetation, right? Which is great for breathing and pollution and mental health too. And then we put a buffer here for trees. And you do see a really narrow strip of bike lane. It doesn't get used too frequently. There's a parallel trail on this side, and then it really does expand after this block anyway, and there's some more protection. So I didn't take a picture of that, but this is the spine of Brownsville's hike and bike network. It's 8.5 miles. It goes from that midi-cultural district where I just showed all the way north to Palo Alto. And I wanted to show it because you can see all these intersections of major roads. For the most part, it's safe. But then when you do cross these major intersections, after the trail was built, we had to go back and do some treatments to improve safety, especially here at Alton Glore. There's an elementary school. That's where we put that refuge island. TxDOT was doing some median projects on FM 802, and they created a refuge island for us. That's connected to our north side bus transfer facility. But here I really wanted to show how we can use available public easements and right-of-way, like our drainage canals and infrastructure, and transform them for walkability, bikeability, and even tourism, right? It doesn't have to be just for transportation, but recreation, increasing recreational opportunities. And we talked about public lands and public land agencies. So, this is just an example, but if you have state parks or county parks in and around your communities that you can connect to, work with them, talk to them. We've talked to our partners here at Palo Alto, at our National Park Service partners and our U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service partners, and they are interested in contributing funds and contributing time. So we did an extension over here along Palo Alto, and the biggest concern was mitigation for some areas of the trail that during building it got, I guess like they went over like their little space that they were supposed to keep the construction to, and so then they had to come back and be mitigated. But basically my point is you can work with them. You can negotiate what needs to get done and put that into your contracts. And then for this proposed trail, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, contributed a match of $1.5 million to help us fund it. We won't find out until October if we got additional funding. But it was a great example of how they're already using their dedicated program funding to help build infrastructure that can transform public lands for walking and biking. And this is Harlingen's Arroyo, Colorado Trail. They got funding from a private foundation, the Valley Baptist Legacy Foundation. It's a health organization. And so they have this frequently used Arroyo Trail. We have counters there to show the data of how many people are using that. It connects McKelvey Park to this World Birding Center, the Thicket. There's another park here and another park here. And now this is already under construction. We actually just drove by it this morning, and it'll connect all the way to Dixieland Park and all of these residential areas. So this is completely off-road. It looks like it's a big park, basically a linear park, but it gets people away from the roads. And I think like the biggest intersection is here at the expressway. Other than that, they're kind of crossing intersections on a lower level. And the other community to do that is in Precinct 2 in Hidalgo County, and I'll show you that in a minute. But this is the plan to use that arroyo all the way. It's kind of challenging because I think there's some private land ownership here, and that's when it gets challenging, when you have private landowners. But ideally, the goal is to connect the city of San Benito and the city of Harlingen through this connection, through this segment. And so again, looking for predominantly public land spaces and identifying areas for parking and amenities, where can people be connected? That's all part of the planning. And you don't have to plan alone within your community. More and more on a federal, state, and even on a regional level, they're looking for regional projects. We can no longer just fund something that helps the population of one community. Now, federal, state funding is being more dedicated to projects that can help more than one community. Double your population by working with the community next door to you, and open up spaces like this that may already be publicly accessible, but really becomes more welcoming for the individual to be active or to use for transportation. And so here's another one that we have. This is the Precinct 2 Trail in Hidalgo County. It connects the communities of McAllen, Far, and San Juan. And prior to joining the MPO, I had no idea it existed. And I'm what I would consider to be like an enthusiast for trail, right? Especially trails in the Rio Grande Valley. And so when I came on board at the MPO and I found out about this trail, I was really stoked. I thought it was so great that they invested to go under the road. That's a huge investment. It had to affect traffic. It had to affect, even the maintenance of the drainage canal, but they did it. It's possible. You can get through it. And now it is one of the most used trails in the valley. And so I'm excited to see what else Hidalgo County plans or wants to build, but I applaud them for making this safe crossing under the road instead of making them go up and over. I think, and also a great use of drainage infrastructure. I know that when it rains a lot, it's a slippery location, but the idea is that it's temporarily a safety concern versus year-round safety concern. And so we did go over that, and we went over that. It's 11:23, so this is great timing, actually. Do we have any questions for me? Okay. I guess one of the last things I want to say, again, I didn't go too technical into the treatments or to cross segments. Really, I wanted to share resources and show this alignment, the overall goal for traffic safety. But if you're from here, you plan to live here the rest of your life like I do, this is a bait shop in, I believe, Arroyo City. And I've been there with my dad, and it's very small. It's been there for a really long time, but I'd love in the future, after we together as a region build more infrastructure for walking and biking, I'd love to work with the economic development agencies, small business agencies, and get some grants or some loans, small low interest loans tailored for small businesses so that they can really help on the commercial side, encourage walking and biking. Because if I chose to bike from Brownsville to Port Isabel, which I've done once, is like, you want to get there and rest. Maybe I want a bed and breakfast. Maybe I want to go eat. Maybe I need to fix my tire and take it to a bike shop. But we need the the facilities, not just public facilities, but private facilities to support the industry, whether it's for residents or for tourists. And I think it is overall an economic tool, and we can get, you know, 3 birds with 1 stone: transportation, recreation, and physical activity for health, and then economically, you know, generate new jobs and new opportunities for our community. But with that, we're ending 5 minutes early. Any questions online, Miguel?
Questions? I'll just put your email there.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, then everyone knows how to contact me. Thank you so much for joining our first RGV Project Manager Traffic Safety Training. Hopefully we'll continue seeing you, and you know where to find me, and we build better relationships. Signing off. Thank you.